Hello and welcome back to another episode of Twisted Iron Projects. In today's video, we're going to be learning how to make bolt jaw tongs. These tongs I'm making specifically are going to be for 3/4 inch all the way up to 1 inch square or round bar. So if you want to see how these are made, make sure to stick around. To start things off, I am going to be using 3/4 inch round bar, and I'm going to be using my clip horn here to measure out the nib, or the amount of material I want to start my half-ace blows. I'm going to be using this clip horn a lot this video to keep things consistent and around the same measurements for both sides of the tongs. That way they fit together very nicely at the end. And to start the nib here, I am going to do those half-face blows at my mark that I made and at the closest side of the anvil to me. This is kind of a fundamental technique on any type of tong that you make. What I'm going to do is, with my material here, I want it to draw out to right around 3/8 of an inch thick to be about 4 inches long. Now I'm going to use this spacer here, just kind of make sure I got my measurement. It's a little bit easier for me using put my hand closer with that hot ruler. Now that I've got that section done, I'm going to rotate it to my tong hand, do a 45-degree offset, and then we're going to do half-face blows again. This section is going to be setting the boss of the tongs, or the section that the rivet goes into to hold the two pieces together. Now this is an area of the boss where you really want to be consistent and get your measurements as close as possible with both sides of your tongs. That way they fit together correctly, they open and close fairly smoothly, and they just overall look better. Now here we are again with the basic fundamentals of tong making. Start at the edge of the anvil that is closest to you, and start with half-face hammer blows. Rotate it towards your tong hand, do a 45-degree offset, half-face hammer blows, and then you're going to rotate it towards your tong hand once again and do another half-face hammer blow at the edge of the anvil. As you saw there, I used the clip horn in order to set my mark initially because it's a good reference point for me to use for measurements. I know the exact measurement of that clip horn, so I can try to keep the sections I need to that same measurement. Now this technique of half-face hammer blow, rotate towards your tong hand, half-face hammer blow, rotate towards your tong hand is a really common fundamental technique that a lot of smiths use for making their tongs. So this goes for quite a few tongs out there that you want to make. You just kind of got to adapt the nib for your exact purpose. Now if you notice that section that I kind of circled around with my soapstone, that is going to be where I plan on putting the rivet. That's the main section that I want to keep very close to the same dimensions on both sides. That's called the boss. Holds it together, and the closer you have it to the same dimensions, same thickness, all that stuff, and the center punch for your hole, the better and smoother your tongs are going to go together and feel when you're using them. So that is a very key thing. And with my boss, what I'm trying to do is get 3/8 inch thick, 3/4 inch wide by 1.5 inch long. I'm going to use that measurement to keep them both the same size on each side of the tongs that I'm making. Now we're going to move on. Now that I got that offset done for the boss, I got the nib taken care of, we're going to draw out the reins a little bit. My goal on this section right here is I want a 4-inch long piece that is 1/2 inch thick. I'm going to leave it square. And so it's going to add a little bit of support and rigidity to these tongs, and just I don't want the entire reins to be square because that's uncomfortable in the hand, so I figured just a 4-inch section will be good. Then I'm going to do an offset just mainly because I like the way that it looks, and continue on with the rest of the tongs. Here we are. I'm going to do that little bit of an offset at the end of my 4 inches, and then I'll continue to draw out the rest of my reins. This is just what I prefer. It's how I enjoy the look of my tongs and the feel of my tongs. But you could do whatever you want for your style or your comfort for your tools. That's beauty blacksmithing. You can make things however you want. Now to speed things up a little bit, I am going to bounce back and forth between using the horn of my anvil as well as the face of my anvil to help draw out this material faster, because it is 3/4 inch thick and it is fairly tough to move, especially if you haven't been swinging a hammer very long. Heavier hammer does help, bigger anvil does help, but the really big thing to have to apply less force and tire yourself out is to use that horn. Use some way to spread the material in that direction and then flatten it out. It makes it move quite a bit longer. Now here on my reins, what I'm wanting to do is after the 4-inch long half-inch square section, I'm going to take them down to 3/8 square by anywhere between 4 to 7 inches. Really depends on what length you prefer. I think I'm going to go for right about 7 inches on this set, and then I'll cut it off and round up those corners to make it a little bit smoother in the hand, a little bit more comfortable. And you can cut this with a saw or a grinder. I just decided, since I've already got the metal hot, it's easiest for me to use my hot cut tool that I made out of a old splitting maul. Again, just find ways to make that metal move and do what you want it to do. Now I am going to take a moment and say thank you to all of you that are watching my videos. If you're enjoying this video, make sure to hit that like button down below or leave a comment. If you don't like it, hit the thumbs down and leave a comment. Whichever way it is, I appreciate the feedback, and if you're really enjoying the videos that I put out on my channel, make sure to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. It really helps out a lot, and I appreciate you guys. You're fantastic. So, like I said, I am going to continue to draw this metal out until I get it to about that 3/8 square. I want my overall tall length to be right around 11 inches before I start to knock down the corners on the back 7 inches of these reins, just to make it smoother in my hand. It kind of rounds it up a little bit. Knock off those corners. I'm just going to get it hot, flip it onto one of the corners, and gently tap down. And not really gently tap, but not doing a full hammer swing either. I'm not trying to concave the metal right there. I'm just trying to smooth out those corners, knock them off. And I will do that until I get the desired results and comfort for my hand. Then I'm going to take it over to the edge, a little last half inch or so. I'm going to curl it over. Kind of gives it a nice little flare and finish look to it. Now that we're done with that, with the reins, we're going to come back up to the nib. Now, I mismeasured and I wanted more than 4 inches originally. And so I am going to use this time to draw it out a little bit. And actually I feel like this is going to turn out to be a better looking final product in the end. Having that smaller neck on the nib with a wider actual jaw of it to hold the material in that V section I'm going to make here in a little while. So I'm just going to work on drawing that out. I do bring it down to about 1/2 inch by 3/8. And I think I got it an additional 1/2 to 3/4 inches longer. Now that we got that section taken care of, we're going to actually start to bend the jaw into shape. I did start off by bending it backwards towards the boss a little bit, going just past the plane, the flat plane there, and then use my horn to round over the other section. And for the time being, I'm going to keep the actual jaw part of the nib in line with where my rivet will be. I'll do some further adjusting later on to get it to the point to where I want it. Then I'm going to take and find my center mark on my boss and do a center punch. That way you could either drill it or punch it, whichever way you prefer. I think with this set, since they're turning out so well, I'm going to go ahead and drill it and not worry myself about accidentally messing it up, because I'm not that great at punching holes yet. We'll get there though. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and stop with this one section and do the same exact process that I did throughout this video for that section of the tongs to the opposite end of the rod here, and make my second half of my tongs. There they are, side by side. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my cold chisel, and I'm just going to do an outline here of the center mark of the jaw, and that's where we're going to be creating our V. I did try this without making that line, and it was a little bit more difficult, so I'm going to chisel down a little bit, and it definitely made it easier. Now, using my V-swedge that I made in the previous video, and a striker, thank you to Timberline for helping me out with this, I am just using a piece of 1-inch square bar here. It's mild steel, nothing fancy as a die, until the time I finally get a top forward fuller made. But there it is, the V section. Now we're moving on to the rivet. Still kind of getting the hang of doing rivets. This one I should have drilled the hole a little bit smaller than I did, but it worked out pretty well. Just had to let the rivet cool down a little bit. Now that I've got that one side of the rivet already has a head on it, then I got the shaft. I'm going to heat up the side that's not headed yet, and then tap it down with my hammer. See, I'm going to be turning it back and forth, trying to make sure it seats evenly and gets squished down even, so it's not folding over like a nail when you're swinging and you end up missing slightly. While it's still warm, I'm going to kind of open them up, close them up a little bit, just kind of work them back and forth to make sure they don't seize up on me and forge well together. Didn't reach that type of heat, but just to be on the safe side, it's good to make sure that they move freely while it's still hot. Now we're going to go into the actual forming and fitting the jaws of the nib to the stock material. And at the same time, I'm going to be working on straightening everything up, making sure it's all in line and looking good. So I just took my 3/4 inch piece there, put it in there, squished it down with the vise, and that got me a pretty darn good fit. Going to hit each one of the sides there, just to make them look a little bit more flush and even, and make sure that V shape stayed good. I'm going to just be kind of working with it, finagling back and forth for a while until I get the desired effect and shape that I want in alignment. Alignment is a pretty big thing with these. All the while doing this, I'm going to occasionally open up the tongs, close them back up, just to make sure that rivet is still seated pretty well and holding tight. Good wire brush goes a long way in helping you keep your board clean. Now, I'm doing this a little offset. It's not necessary, but I definitely like the look of it. I'm using my jaws here as basically a measurement to get the exact dimensions that I want to keep them both even. We're just going to tap them over a little bit until they're in line with each other and off-center on the side closest to the jaws. And so I just prefer the way that it looks. It does kind of take a little bit more finagling to keep everything straight, but to me it seems more like a finished product with this little bit of a bend in there. Then I'm going to go ahead and make sure that the reins are nice and straight with each other and in line. Alignment in tongs is a fairly important feature, so don't skimp out on it. Take the time to actually make sure things line up well. Now I do want to announce real quick that I haven't been making very many videos the past 2 weeks because I actually went out and I got a 3D printer and I've been playing around with it, doing some 3D sculpting and such. And so expect to see a couple of videos on that. It's not going to be a whole lot, but I've definitely been having a lot of fun with this, and I'm always learning something. So I've been doing pretty well with blacksmithing, so I figured it's time to start learning another thing at the same time. And so I'll continue with the blacksmithing quite heavily because I definitely enjoy it. But I got myself a 3D printer, and that so far has been a lot of fun as well. So I'll keep you guys up to date on that and have some videos on 3D printing for if any of you are interested in that. There we go. The tongs are pretty much finished at this point. Just some final touches and scraping them up, clean them off. And then we're going to touch them up with some hot beeswax while the metal is still hot itself to help us soak into those pores and just kind of preserve them, help them keep from rusting. I do this with all of my tools and all my blacksmith products that I do actually. It's just a little coat of beeswax goes a long way in preserving your material. But that's pretty much going to be about it for today. And say this project turned out very well. I'm quite pleased with the way it ended. And so make sure you guys stick around for more videos. As always, stay classy, party on.